Every international order eventually reaches a moment when the assumptions that once guaranteed stability begin to unravel. For nearly 8 decades after the Second World War, the global economy was largely organized around a system commonly described as Pax Americana. At its core were 2 powerful pillars. The first was the US dollar, serving as the world's dominant reserve currency, making international trade faster, more predictable, and deeply interconnected. The second was America's extensive network of security commitments, allowing many countries to focus more on economic development while relying on US military protection for broader strategic stability. This system generated extraordinary economic growth. Global trade expanded at an unprecedented pace. Manufacturing networks stretched across continents. Populations grew, living standards improved in many regions, and international commerce became more integrated than at any previous point in modern history. Yet every successful system eventually creates new contradictions. One of the most important transformations occurred between the United States and China. Over time, America increasingly specialized in finance and consumption, while China emerged as the world's manufacturing center. Goods flowed from Chinese factories into global markets, while capital increasingly circulated through American financial institutions. According to the ideas presented in the source material, this relationship gradually concentrated industrial production in one country while expanding financial speculation in the other, creating structural imbalances that became more visible over time. When an international order begins facing internal contradictions, governments rarely accept decline as inevitable. Instead, they seek to preserve existing advantages. From this perspective, the source argues that Washington increasingly confronted major geopolitical rivals, including China, Russia, and Iran, while simultaneously asking more of its traditional allies through security commitments, economic policies, and energy relationships. Whether one accepts this interpretation or not, it reflects a broader historical question. How do established powers respond when the international balance of power begins to shift? History offers many examples. Athens, Rome, Britain. Every dominant power eventually encountered pressures that challenged the institutions supporting its influence. Although each historical case was unique, one recurring pattern emerges. External competition often coincides with internal economic, political, and social pressures. That is why discussions about global power should never focus exclusively on military strength. The true foundation of influence lies in economic productivity, institutional legitimacy, technological innovation, demographic resilience, and public confidence. When those pillars begin weakening simultaneously, even the most powerful states must reconsider how they adapt to an increasingly competitive international environment. The question, therefore, is not simply whether one era is ending. It is what kind of international order may emerge to replace it. History teaches an important lesson. Great powers rarely decline because of a single military defeat. More often, they weaken when internal pressures begin reinforcing external challenges. Economic structures become less productive, political institutions lose public confidence, demographic trends shift, and competing elites struggle over the future direction of the state. That is the broader argument I want to explore. One challenge discussed in the source material is demographic change. As populations age and birth rates slow, governments face increasing pressure on healthcare, pensions, labor markets, and long-term economic growth. At the same time, younger generations often encounter rising housing costs, slower income growth, and fewer opportunities for upward mobility than previous generations experienced. These trends, according to the source, contribute to growing political frustration and intensified debates over immigration, labor shortages, and national identity. A second challenge concerns the structure of the economy itself. The source argues that advanced financial systems can gradually become more profitable than productive industries, encouraging speculation to expand more rapidly than manufacturing and industrial investment. When finance consistently generates higher returns than production, questions inevitably emerge about long-term economic resilience, technological competitiveness, and the ability to sustain broad-based prosperity. Whether one fully agrees with this assessment or not, the underlying concern reflects a recurring historical debate about the balance between productive capacity and financial power. The transcript also points to growing competition among political and economic elites. Throughout history, periods of major technological and economic transition have often created new centers of influence while challenging established ones. As emerging industries reshape national priorities, political competition can become more intense, particularly when different groups promote competing visions for the country's future. These developments are presented in the source as part of a broader structural transformation rather than isolated political events. From my perspective, the most important lesson extends beyond any single country. International leadership cannot be sustained by military strength or financial influence alone. It ultimately depends upon economic productivity, institutional credibility, technological innovation, social cohesion, and the ability to adapt before structural pressures become crises. History suggests that every international order eventually evolves, not because change is optional, but because changing economic realities reshape the balance of global power over time. The future, therefore, should not be viewed simply as the decline of one nation or the rise of another. It should be understood as the beginning of a new period of strategic competition, where influence will increasingly be determined by innovation, resilience, industrial capacity, and effective governance, rather than by legacy alone. Because every era creates its own international order, and every international order eventually gives way to the next.